Right, an hour and a half, my friend. Okay, here we go.
Right then.
Thanks so much, Joe, for being part of the conference this year.
Heck yeah. Thank you for having me as part of this conference. Um,
Yes,
all
I
the
mean,
great work.
I'm you're very welcome. I'm really fascinated by where people take all of this stuff, and that is the main filter for a lot of the conferences. Just what I find really interesting and hope others do too. But for
Yeah.
those that haven't encountered Joe's work, Joe is sharing uh, in a talk now in a presentation, but also made a contribution to the gallery. So you can check out Joe's work there as well, which I'll probably return to mention that later. But Joe, do you go by Joseph or Joe?
Either
All
way is
right,
fine.
I'm going to call you Joseph Flinders. Is a
Okay, great.
filmmaker, writer, musician,
Uh,
natural mystic, and everyday sort of dude with a BA in philosophy, with a high concentration in physics and mathematics. He studied in a classical mystery school model as a Korea. How do you say it? I forget now. I've lost it.
Aria.
Korea, thank you. It's
Yeah.
my lack of pronunciation skills at the moment. Corey
Yeah.
Apprentice for 3 to 4 years. And I've met Josephine. She's a fascinating woman. I got to spend a little time with her.
Wow.
Really cool lady. Trained in Qigong. And how do you say the second one? I was not as familiar with it. Bagua
Oh,
Zhang? Is that how you
it's
say it?
Bagua Zhang.
Baozhong, 4 to 5
Bagua.
years. In 2014, he wrote a really awesome couple books that I think sound really fucking amazing about harmony, the musical cosmos, and the natural mystic. You can find out more about his music at the Bandcamp under the Invisible Army. Joe, thanks for being part of the conference. Looking forward to learning more about you and your work.
Right on. All right. Well, I think I'm going to try to stand through most of this, and I'm probably only going to be a little thing, so it doesn't matter.
Just
All
tilt
right.
your camera up just a wee bit so we see
Just a
the
wee
top
bit.
of your head.
This is good.
There you go.
Okay.
Perfect. We can see you now.
Okay. So yeah, this is a little something about harmony in a form you probably don't know much about. I mean, I don't really know much about it. It's kind of a new thing in a way, even though it's also kind of as old as the hills. And so the astral tech and the Rosette stone of the title both have to do with this kind of aspect of this idea of mystical harmony and the musical cosmos. And so we're going to take a look at a little bit about what that is and define it. And then we're going to go into a little bit of how it connects through history and through some of the major magical traditions in the past. And how, in the current phase of things, it becomes a totally different sort of tool which encourages communication and sharing and even honesty and fairness rather than the kind of opposite, which is kind of keeping secret. Which, and I know this is a great tradition, and keeping secret is a really wonderful thing in some ways. But in this case, there's no need. And I come from a tradition which is kind of the same way. The mysteries, you put them right there for all to see. And if you're ready, you'll see it. And if you aren't, you won't. Um, and so, what's also worth saying is that this comes from the original idea. You might have heard this even throughout the conference if you've been going to different things, but otherwise, in reading or just in the wind, as it were, you might have heard of this idea of the harmony of the spheres. And so, in some way, this all started for me before COVID hit in Detroit. I was, kind of hanging out with some old friends and also some new ones, and trying to think about a way, a magical system that brings people together. That is something that you can offer as like a Rosicrucian type of thing. Good for everyone kind of thing. It's a crazy idea. but also it came from this idea of the harmony of spheres and looking at things like the tree of life diagram in Kabbalah or Kabbalah, however which tradition you're kind of in, and taking the center of that tree. Um, um, let's see, in oh my, it's way back. Let's go back. Um, so anyway, we'll get to that. The center of the tree is harmony. And so, if you offer this idea of what this harmony is, it's not very simple because the harmony of the spheres means harmony of the planets, stars, things out there in the cosmos, and they don't produce a sound that we can hear, which is a big part of the idea. It has this kind of strange structure. You see that it's about circular motion of celestial bodies produces a sound, but then at the end we say we cannot hear this harmonious sound, and it's something about the proportions and the distances and the speed of the planets in comparison to one another. And so this is the Pythagorean idea, and this is a very Pythagorean idea, and it's a very Orphic idea, where music and the cosmic relation of between things and in all different ways. But it's also an idea about how music is a great way to look at things, to unify anything you're talking about. Taking it from just the energy and something's spin and making it a relation you can kind of draw everything in together and see what kind of music they're making. So the kind of more up-to-date version of this, hopefully it's a little more clear what it is. The musical cosmos theory. It was used to be called Musica Universalis, or the musical universe, or the universal music. So musical cosmos theory is very, very, very close. And so in their spins and orbits, the planets make musical patterns relative to one another. And this is a very simplified version of this, only using a couple properties. The truth is that all properties make music with one another in some fashion or form. And the second little part of this is that all things naturally accord in some fashion with patterns that repeat. And so we take this kind of little idea and we look at this idea of repeating patterns. And we take it and we say, okay, well, what is this harmony that we're talking about? Because the harmony we're talking about here is not necessarily a note you can hear. It's not necessarily a note that exists on pianos or in any way can be heard. There's no air in outer space. Things like this are very much a part of the equation about what this kind of music is. So the idea, I've been trying to work this out. So what is this harmony? This is a mystical form of harmony that is about harmony being the shape and the form of all things, and this is the Kabbalistic idea. And so, but it's also a very Rosicrucian idea. Very, Freemasonry took it up in some capacities, and many orders go by this very same thing. And covens as well, where that harmony is right in the center. And taking this idea seriously meant, let's figure out how to measure this. But what is it? After I measured, I can say it. Before I didn't have any clue. So it's the simultaneous expression or existence of cyclical or repeating patterns of matter and energy. And so anything that repeats and that continues to do so is a part of this mystical harmony. And so that pretty much means everything around you that's continuing to move, continuing to stay put. All those things are involved here. So for me, this is a question of constructing some kind of a tool set or a methodology which is open, and it has no one correct map, no one correct method. It is about developing a natural Orphic language in some respect of the mysteries of cosmic harmony, where you don't need to know the answers with absolute certainty, that is.
Imagine that,
So it's a
Joe.
language. Say what?
I said, imagine that. You don't need to know.
Yeah, there's no need for absolute certainty in this kind of way of thinking. It's because every harmonic system that you can come up with and analyze something with is really about taking the shared proportions and patterns of things in nature, just measured fairly, given that extra time and effort, that it takes to put everything on an equal level. Everything gets a spot at the round table, as it were. And so, this is about developing what I call a natural mystical perspective. And why the natural mystical, uh, it's very much tied to this idea of natural philosophy, which is what physics and science was kind of based on. This kind of idea of using nature in studying it to allow it to learn about it. And not just thinking we know the answer, or not thinking we can connect to the all-powerful God or consciousness and know the answers to everything. It's like, well, let's give those things a chance, like you would anything else that's you consider to be important. And so the natural philosophy is there. But what's different about this is it's not based on Platonic philosophy. It's not based on Neoplatonism, Aristotelianism, any of that stuff. It's based on, if anything's close, it's Socrates, and he had the perspective that uh, you know you don't need to know anything, and it's okay to not know, and it's okay to know that you don't know. But it's also, the unexamined life is not worth living. So it's like, on a question of intellectual passion, this is he's pretty high on that. Um, So we covered this language of ratios. It's worth pointing out that musicae techne, the art of the muses, is kind of like where music gets its name and its nature. And if you think about that, it's sort of like in the original idea, they have this all correct in some very essential ways. If you're going to learn how to make an art which involves the energy and the patterns and the repetitions and the character of kind of anything you can measure, then this is a great way to do it. The only problem was that in ancient times we couldn't really calculate, harmonic systems, which are logarithmic ratio systems. So it's sort of like in order to be useful at all levels, at all sizes, micro, macro, universal, cosmic. You have to be logarithmically correct. You have to be a way that you can preserve the proportions of anything, right? And that's what this form of modern music, which is the equal tempered scales of harmony. They're logarithmically fair, as it were. And so, what it became after, kind of learning it about it and applying it to the world was that it's got this strange quality of having being a cultural and cosmic convergence point, because you know, it's an inclusive view of the world, and it's an inclusive view of power. It's an inclusive view of pretty much anything. Um, and what is it about? What is it based on? It's based on how things are considered equal. Principles of equivalence is what I call it. I think it's a pretty straightforward way of saying it. Einstein had his principle of equivalence, but that only involved mass and energy. What I'm talking about here is how when A is equal to B, that's where the whole game of harmony starts. And they become analytic scales. They're not scales like a ruler where you're measuring this or that. You're measuring the shared proportions between a group of things that you have measured with scales of measurement, not scales of analysis. That's kind of what this harmony thing is. It's always about what's shared. It's never what's totally unique and something that's, made up of some kind of unique whatever quality. It's about how you share things and how you work with that. And it doesn't have to do with this unique thing. It's always about what's shared. Um, so I guess, yeah, we'll talk about some of the shapes, which I think were some of the most astonishing things to me, um, because I think this allows you to see how truly strange this thing is. Uh, that even on a mathematical level, it has this very strange quality, especially when you map it out geometrically. So you see the spiral on the top left. That's a logarithmic spiral, which is Albrecht Dürer called the eternal spiral. And what happens is when you make one turnaround, one complete turnaround, you end up however far away your logarithm is. So if your the base of your exponent on this one is say 8, then by the time you get back around, you're going to be 8 times further away from the center than you were from the beginning, which is 1. Really just 1 plus 7, so whatever. But what happens here, that strange spiral shape, which you can see just kind of does this thing, just keeps on going. It looks like the cochlea, it looks like very many different things. What happens when you mirror that shape? And you wouldn't see it if you mirrored this shape on this one in the center, this one for octave length 2. The second harmonic, if you use that, you won't see this shape. If you use something bigger, something that's outside of our musical system, 8 and above pretty much, you'll see these weird heart shapes. This infinite hall of heart mirrors is what I call it, because it keeps on going. It never reaches zero. It never reaches that final point. Um, and so, uh, yeah, this is shows you how it functions with the cochlea in our brain, and a little bit on my right, but I think it's screen left. Um, um, if you're the screen, though, that makes no sense. It's a device that they're trying to use this technology, um, and the way that this cochlea senses things, to recreate that in hearing aids. Um, And one of the big takeaways here is that in science, what I was very used to hearing about was this idea that time is one dimensional and goes one way. Um, but what is kind of ridiculous about that notion is that even our day, even our second, whatever type of time you want to pick, what's important about it is that it's continuing to happen at the same rate in the same way, right? And our notion of synchronized time, like hit the stopwatch and everybody hit it at the same time and let's figure out what happens, in this synchronized version of time. This is how we have to make, computers need this kind of time to run on, in our culture and the economy and all these sorts of other things need it. Um, but what we really forget is that all of these different forms of time, that we're going to talk about, they all depend mostly, almost totally, on cyclical time, circular time, two-dimensional time, and at least 2 dimensions, maybe more, 3 at least, probably you could stretch there. But 2 dimensions of time, absolutely necessary. And why is that? Because it's time that goes in a circle, right? It happens pretty much the same way every time. It changes a little bit every turn around. And so this idea of cyclical time, created by the spin of the Earth on its axis, and this idea of the year going, by being the orbit, these are the ways that our experience of time is utterly shaped by cyclical time, not by this straight linear time. The more I looked at harmony, the more I thought, oh, well, this linear time it actually happens when harmony is really at a high level, and things start to take on this linear quality, like you can exist on Earth without getting, hit by a huge collision from another planet or another asteroid, because it's not, we're no longer in the early phases of this star system. There's a million ways in which, the cyclical version of time is by far the most rational and kind of realistic version of time. Is it this way? Well, let's see what happens the next time it repeats. Um, um, and so uh, this is before I get like too far into the rest of this bit. I want to point out that even the versions of time that we're looking at, this is a kind of a map of how the year length, it's not the same every year. Okay. Um, and so what I'm trying to get at here is that this picture of the day and the year, it's all about the having an average or a mean. And we were talking about this just before, in terms of in relation to Pythagoras and the Pythagoreans. So all that stuff is kind of has a flexible definition. It's still changing, but it's still pretty much the same, as you can see. Um, so, all right. I don't know if I want to get into that quite yet. Um, okay. So the last thing I want to do before I show you the kind of the goods here, um, or get into kind of like what this thing is kind of become for me and what I would like to get out in the world because of it. And then we'll share some of the music and stuff like that and what these things kind of sound like. But it's all transposed anyway. This is all taking patterns that exist in nature and in the cosmos and working with them creatively, as it were. Um, but what made this a different kind of theory to me, and this is why I want to take a little moment here and throw this down, is that a lot of theories about the physical world in science and in culture, they need this hard evidence. And I've used you know as good of evidence as I can get, from NASA. And I know some people aren't, they don't dig on that. Um, but these sorts of things like day length year, like they're not something that NASA is going to want to, they haven't measured this. They're not looking at this. They're not trying to look at this musical thing. Um, except in resonance ratios in a very limited way. So why do I feel like I don't really need to prove this theory? Well, one is that since I'm using NASA's data and using a pretty straightforward strategy to just transpose whatever frequencies those cycles have, just as they are defined, or as, in terms of frequency, you take a periodic motion, you translate it into frequency. You just basically, you got to translate it into seconds and then take the inverse. Um, So why is this even interesting or important to, to take this music of the universe and kind of bring it all together? What do you learn from it, and why should we pay attention to it? Well, one reason is because it's about things that come back and keep on coming back. And it's about being able to keep it together, by knowing about these things. And so what did they use? They used the same things back in the day that we use now. They use things like, moon cycles, lunar cycles, to kind of track animals, right? And uh, this relates to something that I like to call an inside out proof, right? It's not a proof by external evidence necessarily, even though I think there's plenty of that. Um, but it's a proof that kind of, by its very definition, in some ways, is true. And so it really just becomes like a really reasonable way to look at the world, is what I'm trying to get at. Um, so why is this breeding cycles and this mnemonic language based on? It's almost like a tarot. You have an image of a thing you're interested in, and then you have some data on it. it's in a story even maybe, you know. Um, but counting the cycles of nature and knowing how our environment and how that seasonal factor in life is going to play out and what's going to happen, you're going to want to have some system of timekeeping, some system of the cycles of things. And so the stars become absolutely essential in being able to do that. um, you know, on Earth, everything seems to change, in some places, not everywhere on Earth. Um, so here you have this idea that when it comes to understanding things about how to plant uh, food and develop an agricultural industry, how you're gonna build architecture and how you're going to go about this big sailing trip where you're going to hunt large game on some other land and or whatever you're going to do. The idea is that you're going to need to know about the stars. They had songs for stars, cited in Starships, Gordon White. But it's also kind of it's a culture. They mythologized it. They gave it the power of memory and cultural memory to ensure that when they were getting in their boat, they knew where they were at, depending on where what the song they were singing and what it was telling you was up above you. And so there's all kinds of ways that using music with stars has helped us to kind of develop this lasting culture. And it seems kind of a no-brainer after looking at all this stuff for years, of course. Um, but here's an amateur, pick this out, um, and I love this little quote about memory. The implications are that Ice Age hunter-gatherers didn't simply live in the present, but recorded memories of the time when past events had occurred, and used these to anticipate when similar events would occur in the future. An ability that memory researchers call mental time travel. Um, and so, and so cycles of time, they kind of look like this, when you plot them in a straight linear way versus some other factor. Um, and basically all of these forms here, are record keeping and musical and astral tech, um, you know, but also maps, of how the stars and the cosmos kind of does its thing. This is Gates of Light, kind of an early Kabbalistic work. Uh, Tiferet, beauty, balance, harmony in the center. Um, and this is a kind of an interpretation, or at least a look at. I found this little, so it's a map of modes and keys. Well, actually, this looks like just keys for each of the signs. Some of the maps they made in the past. This looks very harmonic mirror-like to me, is why I put it on there. And it shows you how a theater. This is how they did it, in a very similar way. This is a John Coltrane little, uh, well, literally a star map, but not, not actually a musical map. Um, some ephemerides from the South Americas, um, and you know, kind of little things like this. It's a circle broken up into equal portions. This is what becomes the signature of harmony in this rosette form, and it's because it's about symmetry. And this is kind of like the older ideal of our this conception of out there in the beyond the firmament, of the fixed stars is where the gods lived, um, and how that stratification is kind of baked in there. Um, Cuneiform, Babylonian, Arabic. This is Kepler, um, the Rudolphine tables. This is a modern one, one from the book. Um, some astrological. interest here. I mean, can you imagine having one of these in your backyard? Um, so this is kind of like one of the tough topics that I wanted to just give a quick little thing. Let me see what time it is. I might be running out of time. Okay, cool. Okay, so the natural
You've got about
selection.
an hour. Got about an
Okay,
hour.
okay, okay. So I got like 15 minutes for this. Okay, this is kind of insane. Um, but I wanted to take a little quick look in here about this idea because this is a very important idea to this idea of harmony. Is how is this how is the universe making music? And is it alive or is it conscious or what's the nature of that thing? I mean, I don't know. Um, but for me, what I at least want to do is show how this conception of this kind of celestial clock works. It's not like this old idea. Um, and this is the machine universe. And so Descartes was a big guy in this, even though it's definitely got an old history. And he's even looking at mankind like this. It's like this gear and counterweights and wheels inside, and that we are part of this machine universe. And it's kind of a part of the Enlightenment, the Western Enlightenment, that is, which takes, a scientific ideal and, the scientific method as it's kind of, comeuppance with this, oh, humanity is not special either. Nothing is special, in this scientific enlightened world. And Christian Huygens was another big, or at least a sort of a proponent. And he was a guy that developed ideas about pendulum clocks. And so this idea of cyclical time is pretty, realistic in this, but no one pretty much sees it that way, of course. Um, but he showed how that there's this effect of harmony and consonance, even when you have these really well-made pendulum clocks. And he was an excellent clockmaker. And so he noticed that when you put the clocks together, they would sort of, after a while, they would start to beat, where they're beating in opposition, and they're kind of canceling out this quality where the boards would vibrate until they reach this kind of oppositional harmony thing. And so this comes out of Stephen Strogatz's book called Sync. And so he says the pendulum clocks were not alive. Mindless, lifeless things can sync spontaneously. The sympathy of clocks taught us that the capacity for sync does not depend on intelligence or life or natural selection. It springs from the deeper source of all, he says, the laws of mathematics and physics. The only thing that I have a problem with there is that this idea of laws. I don't really believe in laws of the cosmos. Um, or at least I wouldn't know what they were anyway. Even though it's good to do science and come up with principles that work for a great number of cases, to say that is just a little bit too much for me. I think many scientists and physicists would agree with that. Um, so how does this go into? How does Kepler take this idea and how does he deal with it? Because he's a mystic in some sense. He's looking at this music of the spheres, as it were, and for him, his idea of the music of the spheres got its comeuppance, got its due day in court with this idea of the third law of planetary motion. Um, and it relates the orbital period to the distance it is from the central body, or star. And so it provided a way to kind of get into this music and understand it. As you can see, here's the kind of shows you how Kepler's law applies, um, and how it applies pretty good when you have pretty good measurements, and you have to have a mean, in terms of its orbital period and in terms of its distance. But so with Kepler, what he didn't have a complete set of data, qualitative data on the planets. He didn't know how massive they were, what the radius was, if they had electromagnetic field. They didn't even really have good terms for that, back in those times. Definitely not like very good rigorous definitions. Um, So the music that he saw was the same in some ways. He could see, the perfect fifth. He could see the perfect fourth. He could see other ratios in there in the orbits, which was pretty much enough for him. But in terms of musical calculation, one of the big uh, things that was holding back this idea was that the ability to calculate uh, octaves and in this logarithmic way using fractional exponents. It's not something easy even right now. It's a very strange concept. It's a very difficult concept. It means that everything, you have to understand everything, how everything is just a reproduction of this one thing. Like in some sense, every interval, every octave, it means that it's just reproducing itself. It's like the next generation. It's keeping on going. And so it's all about how many times you reproduce yourself. This is how harmonic systems goes. It's very strange stuff. Um, but it also says that any ratio like this, harmonics are just multiplying anything by an integer. 1 times 2 times 3 times 4. And if you look at music in this more mystical way, where it's more cosmic, more unbiased, you could say, okay, the systems that we use are all using just one idea of harmony, and it's where we're using the second harmonic, right? And so what happens when you look at everything in a way that says it's not just the number 2 that counts, it's pretty much any number, any proportion can come in and be really important, in how a group of things are tied together. Um, uh, this part is just like, okay, it's kind of like the whole Star Wars phenomenon where this is actually in the real world a mystical force that is in its resonating field of energy connects all things in the cosmos through shared cycles of time. And for me, that's like definitely worth considering, but it took me a while to unravel that little beast. Um, it's a language where anything can be defined as the same as any other, depending on how you look at it. But it's also gets into, for me, what I really want out of this is to make it a sort of almost a temple of harmony, where this kind of thing can go out and influence the world with this wonderful little Socratic attitude or whatever. But uh, this is kind of the last thing I'm going to pitch before I'm going to just present some music. I think. Okay. Okay. So this was a project, part of one book, Natural Mystic, uh, and trying to set up what a temple would be like that was truly unbiased, and trying to just conceive of what that might be. And so I went to ChatGPT and I said, "Look, man, redo the Bill of Rights, but make it so that it's not biased to any one species. And if you have to apply to a principle, a cosmic principle, then apply to a principle of cosmic harmony and no kind of special chosenness or any of that sort of business." And so it came up with the Bill of Rights, that I thought was pretty great. Recognizing the inherent value and dignity of all forms of life, we affirm the following principles to ensure the protection of the rights and the well-being of all beings in the cosmos. I think this is a good start for me. For me, it's just a kind of a place setting for like, so that there is something that can be a legal basis possibly, in the future for giving rights to things that aren't human, to things that we don't normally want to give rights to. But that, if you're being fair, they might just deserve it, right? Um, so okay, this is partially what's difficult about this perspective, but I think it wasn't a well. I'm still grappling with this stuff. So natural mystical philosophy and what it doesn't need to be. It doesn't need any absolutely certain knowledge or absolutely correct authorities on knowledge. It doesn't even need any divinely unconscious intelligences. who have complete awareness of all things or even anything in particular. Um, and so the reason why there's no need for gods and God, or for chosen people or chosen species of any kind of this chosen one scheme, is because if you're going to base culture on something that is good for everybody, you can't start with something that is completely biased and that says that this one is better than all the rest, if you get what I'm saying. Um, so with that little, little picking of, a little bit of fighting, which I'm not interested in that. I'm gonna go with what is this about? What is it offering? And why is it a good thing as opposed to the other version of things? Um, well, it's a way that art, science, and culture can have this rebirth where they're all playing in the same playpen. Um, and it's something that I experienced as something that had a very kind of there was a process to it, and it had stages. And part of that process is using astrology and the perennial wisdom of the stars, and then investigating it also with something like NASA and the properties that we can tell, as much as we can tell that they're like this. Doesn't mean that we know, but it means that it's a heck of a lot better than just whatever you can come up with, most likely. Um, and so the last thing I want to say is that uh, for me, if you want a harmonious society, if you want a harmonious family, if you want a harmonious life, if you want to create a harmonious culture, then for me, studying this form of harmony is kind of a no-brainer. It's something that you want to do. Um, and for me, it has to do with something that I like to call the Orphic Resurrection ritual, um, which is about challenging each and every one of you with what you have learned by your culture, your education, and whatever art and craft you have. And how that is, if it hasn't been already in some sense, I'm sure it has, um, to use that, as an opportunity for a mystical resurrection and a re-education, um, and to use our works to restore the divine nature of each thing to itself that we focus on and put our attention to. Um, oh well, yeah, turning on intelligent machineries, how an unorganized machine becomes organized. I think that's a good little thing for all of us, I guess. To carry out some useful task is a form of modification. This is how you program your computer to be intelligent. Um, and this produces a given result with a limited set of inputs, which means that with a certain level of interplay with the world, you pretty much have a ripe and well-made case and situation to where something that is an unorganized thing, such as ourselves, might get organized. And yeah, so I guess from here, um, let's take a little bit. This was kind of one of the maps I used in the middle of this to keep myself together and to keep everything together. Where everything kind of has this form, which kind of the focus is on divine union and the union of all things. And so it works its way out where it kind of has this multi-dimensional definition. And this is kind of like the philosophical form of harmony's mirror, where you're matching something in nature or by imagination with numbers and principles of equivalence. Everything's above board. And then you're taking it all together and making music with it, but also figuring out how that helps you to define the meaning of whatever it is you're looking at and how it helps you to develop meaning. Um, this is a strange little map on how if you took the zodiac and you pretty much made it into this kind of 12-note harmonic system thing idea. Um, it lines up in a very strange way with major chords, where you see that each and every one of these gets this very strict pattern where it sticks by the same element for the third, and then for the perfect fifth, it comes and switches it up a little bit. And it's, I don't know, yeah, very interesting little like set of patterns. I mean, anyone can pretty much work this out on their own. This was a project where I was taking the tree of life and comparing the distances eh, from one to the other in terms of how what their octave relationship was, or how many times the distances uh, greater, Mercury's at one distance and then Jupiter's at the other, and how does that add up? What kind of harmonic thing is going on? How they compare? Um, and so this shows you how, like, the columns of the tree of life, it's a reinforcement of the second harmonic. And since the second and the fourth harmonic are pretty much the same, because mathematically you times two by two and you get four, so in that harmonic system of two, it's the same note, and vice versa. But it shows you how this reinforcing structure takes place in this in a realistic way in this strange old mystical map. I don't know. For me, that was a big, a big thing. It showed the lightning bolt. It shows the columns. And this is just one. Uh, this was another related project. That I think I'm gonna go and do this little music sharing if you guys are interested to see some of this.
Don't want
Give
to
me
hear
a
your
sec.
music, Joe. We don't
Okay,
want to
so
hear it. We're done. We're done. Can you tilt your video down if you're going to sit
oh
down?
yeah,
Not
yeah.
that you might stand.
Okay. So here, this one's called "All the Music in the Day." I think you guys can see this actually. Um,
We can
and
see. Yeah, I think we see it. Go ahead.
okay, so this is based on. Oh, actually, let me stop it real quick. It's very short. So this is based on a day 4/4/2024, and it pretty much uses the whole natal chart idea as the circular part is how you find the rhythm, and you can cut it up in a million ways. But I try to generally cut it up into each quarter as a bar, pretty much.
Joe,
And
should we be seeing something?
oh,
Or is it, we see this pink slide? Is that
it
what we
would
should
be.
be seeing?
Oh, okay. Well, let me try to show you an harmonic mirror.
Oh, I just wanted to make sure we were seeing the right thing. That's all.
Yeah.
As long as you know that's what we see, I am totally cool.
Oh, I get it. Okay, so you're seeing just the
So,
pink. Okay.
no.
That'll do for now. So this, all the music in the day is basically one day made into music. And what are the notes coming from? They're coming from the spin of the planetary body in question. And so you take that and I have to transpose it like 30 octaves or some crazy thing. And so the first part you'll hear Saturn goes first, and that's the A note, and it progresses to the more the larger bodies as a sort of melodic progression. And this can all be you can the a little bit more of how it exactly what the structure is online several places. I'll talk you through a little bit.
You know what? When was the last time, Joe, that you shared music on a slide on a Zoom call?
Is it not playing? Okay. Bum, bum. and it plays them all in succession. Uh, Here. Then it plays it as a musical piece. All right, so that was one note. Hold on. All right, so that was just from one day. And this is a natal chart. A good friend of mine, and so I'm going to show you the first little bit here is what it sounds like with as little manipulating or tweaking as possible. So it's very irregular sounding. And you have,
Joe, how are you controlling the volume on your computer right now?
oh, is it not, are you not able to really hear it?
But how high do you have your volume on?
Pretty high,
Corsa.
actually.
Okay, Corsa is fine for her. You're doing fine. I'm just checking with people that they can hear it well.
It's good.
People
Sound is
seem to
all
be hearing it. Go
pretty sure.
ahead.
Um, okay, this is a more musical interpretation. I'll play it again. All right, so this would be making it into a whole movement, one motif. So, so those are some examples of using this calculated music of the stars, and kind of all those pieces. Uh, every note I'm only using the notes that are really close, within 1%. Of a kind of a hit, as it were, for according to that planet and according to a specific property, usually the day length or the year length. Um, and so, kind of, it's like this exercise in how limited your musical ideas are, and that kind of dictates what you can kind of do with it. But that's just me keeping a very kind of like as strict as I can interpretation of what some of this music might sound like. Even though, like, if you keep it natural, it has this kind of strange irregularity about it. But then, of course, when it comes a point where there's a huge, level of a large number of convergences, and specifically kind of harmonious parts, of the sky, then of course you have a very different sort of music, of course, that has this kind of extremely regular quality. Um, and let me see. Is that pretty much it? Do I have any more time or?
Yeah, sorry, I'm checking that my mic is on. I think you have 30 minutes.
Oh, really? Um,
Yeah,
okay.
but you can use as much of it as you want.
Okay. So let's see here. Um, Here is a little bit of something with Venus. The first part uses a day length, then the year, and then the day. And so the year and the day are different scales, but you see they have a very interesting kind of gypsy quality. So yeah, this scale is the bottom one here. All right. So yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty much, I don't know. I think I touched upon everything I really wanted to do. Um,
Great. Share
yeah.
one more song, Joe. Share one more song.
All right. Let's see. Um, all right. So we'll take it in a very different direction. If you're all right with that. So
Mhm.
this is hold on, let's see if I can find this little doodly. This is a little thing I did on Mars. Um, and so this is kind of like a more of a metal or with a band, you know. And I kind of tricked it out a little bit. And this is kind of so we'll do this one. Oh man, I'm not even sure which one's the right one. Oh boy,
Right. Do the wrong one. Do the wrong one, Joe.
I should. So this uses Mars Mars by its distance.
go get some studying done?
Good luck on that exam tomorrow.
All right.
That was fun. I'm a
Yeah.
nerd, as you can tell. That was
Right
fun, man.
on. Heck
Uh,
yeah.
what
Yeah,
could you play us something mercurial to end? Can you play us something mercurial?
yeah, I could do that.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
And this one, I think I probably didn't work on this one quite as much as the other ones, but whatever. Um, it still gives you an idea of what is going on with Mercury. This is just the intervals straight up. The rest of it was kind of constructed for a drone.
Thank you so much, Joe. That was all really fucking amazing.
Right
Really
on.
enjoyed all of that. Thank you for bringing this element into the conference. It's really important and special. Thank you very much.
Heck yeah. Thank you for having me. It's been amazing to present this kind of material where it's not always kind of certain, how do I fit this kind of material into anything. And the openness and the kind of like creative spirit that you got in making the conference and this and basically all the time you put into, making it so kind of it's very organized, very wonderful kind of stuff. Everything's kind of given its care and attention. Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Joe. You're
All
welcome. You're welcome. Go ahead. Were you gonna say something?
that pretty much wraps it up, for as far as I wanted to go back and see a bunch of stuff that I missed on the first when it was live, you know, and
Did you join the conference Discord server? Not
I
that you have, not that you
I
have to. That's a good way because the thing is that really what that's for is for people to connect, and the library will be available. And if you guys want to watch things together, people just have to message me and say they want to. Time zones are a bitch around this shit. Do you know what I mean? It is the biggest pain in my ass.
that's what I'm
But
saying. I'm so
oh
impressed.
God. But the thing around it is now we've got some channels that have some time zone related things so people can have their own exactly. Thank you. Thank you. Someone in the chat said screen share in the Discord. Exactly. You can watch it together. I think you should do that, and connect because that's the thing is there's too much for any one person to really watch this whole time. I mean, I
Yeah,
hope nobody else tried to do it.
it's true. This is
Oh,
true.
anyway, so that's that point. And then I think the only other thing I was going to say about it is, did anybody have any questions? We have a little moment in case. I did see, a couple of technical questions, of course, which is going to be there around any software you want to point out that people could fuck with around this shit. And then just kind of confirming that some of the base structure of what you are doing could be modified using all different kinds of formats. Um, and produce interesting and different results like shifting octaves, etc. The way you fuck with this kind of music, right? You're just messing with it. But is that true? You could just kind of play with it in add another. I like your idea of limiting your amount of variables. And
Huh?
then, you're following like an assignment to the sounds that you're using for these things, but then you could shift it this way or that way and do all kinds of other shit with it to an
Okay.
extent, right? Like,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, that's the crazy thing is because you can translate it with this one system of harmony that
exactly.
uses two, and you can get something that we recognize if you use 12 notes, and that's only if you use those kind of that kind of way of looking at it. But you can use this stuff this is what's so awesome about the solar system and about the stars is they're playing and making music and making musical patterns on in so many musical systems at once.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, totally. And that goes
And
back to your logarithm thing you
yeah,
presented at the
yeah,
beginning, because
yeah.
logarithms is how we go from one base to another, and it can be
Yeah.
a
Oh,
radical change,
yeah.
and produce very different things.
I produced
Um,
like that recently. It is bizarre stuff. Like the tech is just now
yes.
like available. Aphex Twin did one with someone else that allows you to make music in different octave systems and stuff. And there's other tech out there too to do it. But
Yeah. Did
yeah,
anybody else have any questions? Thank you for answering those two. Oh, what about software? Is there an easy software that you would recommend people wanting to mess with music just because you're using a lot of it? Is there any one that you think is super cool that is accessible for people wanting to fuck with making sounds?
yeah, yeah. Cakewalk is free. Um,
I've used that one. That's fun.
yeah,
Okay, cool.
definitely fun. Definitely, it takes anytime you get into software, it takes time to get your bearings. It's all about
Like
interface.
astrology software.
Yeah, like astrology software. That's right. It takes time. There's always time involved in that process. It seems like, oh, you just want to strap right in and get all the stuff you're looking for, but no, it's not like that. Music is notoriously difficult to set up in a home capacity. So,
Yes.
just keep all that in mind.
Um,
Rock.
Then the only thing I wanted to throw in there to
Mhm.
you, just as a question, around it personally, we talked about limitation. I thought that was really cool in the way that you applied it. The strange irregularity. Okay. So this is the thing that would have to be true, right? Like in the way we normally think of harmony is like everything's perfect and nothing's going to change and it's all that way and all of this, right? That's like a dumb concept of harmony
Oh, yeah.
and if we're really going for it, we are talking about harmony that does have this continuity. discord aspect to
Oh,
it,
oh, yeah.
and right, to an extent, but it's never like extreme forever all the way all the time, right? It just sort of has. And I think, do you think that's true?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question. Like, from one system of things, one group of things, like one proportion might seem totally fucked up. It might seem totally dissonant. It fucks their world up. It messes their way of life up if they, go to life according to these sorts of rhythms, these sorts of things. But what happens in the universe, is that over time, that weird one, if it's massive, if it continues, if it persists, even if it's small. They found out recently that the moon is actually changing our orbit. You know, it's changing our day length subtly over time.
Yes.
And so
Entangled.
it changes our orbit too. And so everything comes around if it sticks in, if it stays with it, and persists. It ends up becoming a pattern, a shape of harmony. And so it's always making this music, it's always coming into being, and it takes a while for something to be established as like a, common coin of the universe, I would imagine, um
Mhm.
but yeah, it's a big question, what will,
Okay,
you know
well, I won't make you have to do it, but the thing you talked about at one point was the irregularity. So let's just put it that way. You were talking about there's regularity, and then there's some irregularity. It's not a deviation from harmony though, because there's a bit of irregularity. That's my point, right? Is like, or I'm asking you, is that it is just seems like that's also part of it, right? Like there is this.
Yeah, well, imagine you're in a dance cycle, right, or something like that, or you're in a you're doing movement, right, and there's a
Mhm.
pattern, and in this thing, and maybe what you're doing, it always has to repeat, right, and there's different parts of this thing, and so when you get to this same part again, you're hopefully you'll be able to do it exact, right? Hope, I mean,
Which sounds a lot like rotation or any other way of going round and round that we want to talk about. So I'm with you.
yes, and that's kind of my point. Is that this mystical thing, in some sense, it's fine that it's mystical because its reality is established over time, long periods of time, and its nature is established over that. And for me, like laws of nature, this is not really a necessity at all. You
So
know,
what
it,
happens if it changes really fast?
Well, with something, it's like getting a sense of how nature might react. I don't know, but the more
Yeah.
massive system has behind it, the more pervasive that thing is, the more it takes to take, for that sudden change to happen. Things happen in chaos theory like that. They're called bifurcations. You probably heard of that, where a system seems to be going the same for so long, and everything seems to be the same, but all of a sudden it seems to change suddenly, completely. Like everything just sort of follows suit. And this happens in chaos theory when like these, like a pattern that you seem as like a fluctuation actually is a pervasive pattern that's over time. It's built, it's kind of ingrained in everything over time, and so these kinds of things happen too. But on a planetary level, I don't know, man. From what I can tell,
True, true.
planetary systems, star systems grow up together as one from the get-go. Is that seems to be the majority, where it's not like the sun was doing this thing and then everyone else was like, okay, we're going to come around here and go with you. It's more like as a system, as a whole, they built this thing. They become what this harmony is over time, over a long period of time. uh for me, the musical cosmos idea is a really it's a freeing idea for me.
Yes.
um
Thank you for that. And then the last one, just, and I will leave you alone, is okay, at one point we did sound like you were about to become an atheist there, you know what I mean? When it was like no God, no gods, no right? But then you suddenly throw in use the word divine, right? So then
yeah, yeah.
do we need divinity?
Oh yeah, for me, having clear ideas about what divinity is and what kinds of ideas of divinity are useful to me or to you,
Yeah.
those are things worth finding. Ideas that are actually useful, not something that blocks you off from reality, not something that blocks you off from a real engagement with the thing, but something that encourages you to get into it, get involved with it, and challenge yourself with it, That's, anyway, that's my
So
take on it.
what was the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the Orphic cross? What was that shit? Sorry, I'm not saying it right. It was not a cross. It looked like a cross, but what was the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of that?
You
It
know,
had something going on.
that's the funny thing about the cross, you know what I mean? Because for me, hey, if you believe in that way, fine, But for me, that, it is a very limiting
I like
factor.
it as a shape. I think it worked really well. I mean, just what was it though? Like it seemed like it went in a pattern. I'm sorry that I didn't follow
No,
well enough at that moment.
it was like you saw it like this quick, But no, the pattern is from making a box, right? And it's kind of like
Mhm.
my little box of mysteries, right? But the pattern comes from trying to match the directions, right? The ritual directions, in the cardinal directions, with what tool I was actually using in, that I felt was about that direction. For the West was musical. It's because it's given that traditionally in a lot of ways. With the moon and a lot of stuff. But everybody's got their own thing. So what direction? Whatever. But mathematics and physics or science matched up with music, and music. This is the funny thing about this idea is that music is the guiding system. It's the thing that ties the room together. It makes sense. It gives you a real experience of what it is that you're looking at, not just a ratio or proportion, not just a number, but something you can feel and experience. And
Yeah,
that
that's
gives,
that paradox.
yeah, yeah. It's like something that, doesn't exist by you seeing it, by you feeling it, but by engaging with it, you can identify parts
Mm.
and call them up kind of in this very kind of like summoning orphical fashion, taking a thing of using things nature to make art, with that, to kind of call it as it were.
Yeah. Thank you
Um,
so much, Joe. Thank you. It was really cool. I'm gonna have to watch that part again because I want to see it. Can you show it to us one more time? Just show us the cross.
oh
That
yeah,
was
yeah,
horrible.
sure, no, sure. This one right
Uh,
here.
yeah, let's see it. You have to share your screen again.
Oh
I
man,
know. I'm a huge pain in the ass.
no, you're excellent, is what you are.
I try. I try
I
my
mean,
best.
here we go, there and there. Yeah,
Because experience was in the middle. Okay. So it
yeah,
got music, philosophy, science, mathematics. Mystery gets thrown in there. So we're in that box, like mystery and experience are kind of sitting on top of each other, right?
yeah. That's right. It's sort of like our experience is our way to mystery, right? And
Mm.
these other things are just whatever you're looking at and experiencing. These other things, the philosophy, the mathematics, the music, the science, that is just investigating your experience. That's all. Those are tools that if you use them in a particular way, they match up and they're literal. They don't need
You
metaphor.
could put any sort of art, craft, or learning
Oh, yes,
sort of within this, right? I mean, to an extent.
absolutely. You
And
definitely
it
can.
would, and I like that part of the thing you're saying on the other side of it too. Very
Hmm.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely for architects, musicians, filmmakers, writers, any medium that I can think of definitely has this quality where if you're a writer, the philosophy side, it's actually language belongs there, because everything that you're seeing is a form of language and something that we're going to take from experience and try
Yeah.
to tease out the mystery of something.
Yeah.
And so each
For, oh, go
separate
ahead.
language.
Sorry, Joe.
Oh no. And
Say that
so
last part again. I missed, I
each
spoke
of
over
these
you.
really is only a kind of a specific sub language, right? mathematics or music or science, or even a medium in which this kind of language can take place. And so the one that ties everything, the one that everything is kind of pointing towards and trying to get at, is this mystical thing, right? And so for me, the reason why it's at the bottom is because all of these things are rooted in the mysteries. And it's not a thing where I would be like, okay, I'm just going to teach everybody the math and the music and the science and philosophy and forget about the rest. No. In fact, this perspective means that that the mysteries need to be in there with all that cultural education, with what we hold to be most important, right? We want the mysteries there because it preserves their real nature, not what we think about it, right? And that's why it's there, kind of. So
Cool, cool. Well, I have more to say, more to ask, but I'm gonna leave you be. Thank you very much. Socialize with people for a little bit. If there's anybody, I think somebody's definitely running that show. Mary, you got the riverboat going. That's awesome.
I
We will
over.
start 5 minutes late. 5 minutes late for the next session. I will see you guys there. Thanks again so much, Joe. Bye
Thank
now.
you very, very much.
Yeah, and
Bye bye.
thanks everybody for being here.